What's up, guys? Episode 94, and we're talking about the little buttonhole that's on the lapel of a men's suit jacket or a sport coat. Now, this little buttonhole is something that you've probably noticed, but now that I'm mentioning it, you're probably going to really notice it. It's not always on suits. It's usually going to be on a higher-end suit or one that's been constructed, in my opinion, properly with a very old-school approach and very traditional menswear style. But we don't really use this very often, right? And if we do have it, it's not always open. It's just kind of for decoration. So why do we have this buttonhole all the way up here in the lapel? And why is there just one? How come there's no button over here? Well, a couple stories. Like so many things in menswear, there's a whole bunch of different ideas on the genesis of different items on our clothing. We talked about working buttonholes a while back on the sleeve. That's a different story. But for this buttonhole, there is a little bit of a background on. Sometimes there was a button on this side, and if it was really cold outside, sure enough, you would button 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons down, and then you would button this one up here to really keep the wind out, right? And that didn't really, it's before my time, and I think before Ron's time. We don't really see that anymore. And obviously having a button on this side will be a much different look. Kind of a little bit distracting in today's context. But, it makes a lot of sense, right? This is a jacket, whether it was a sport coat like this or a suit, it's a jacket. It keeps you warm. You throw a scarf on, a pair of gloves, you button that thing up, and you're going to stay pretty warm. Now that's kind of gone away, but another interesting story is that this buttonhole was used to help keep your hat on. So back in the 1920s, 1930s, and up through mid-century, a lot of men would wear a dress hat. You'd have your suit, and you put your hat on, leave the house, you're good to go. That's obviously kind of gone away, but something that was apparently very popular back then, or even not very popular, but there was certainly a number of men that had this. There was a hat that had a cord around it, and that cord actually had a little button on the end of it, on kind of an elastic piece. And so when it was super windy outside and you were afraid of losing your hat, what you would do is you would take this little piece of string and tuck it through your button, or tuck it through the lapel hole here, and your hat, in case it did blow off, would not go very far, and it would just fall down, you pick it back up, put it back on, right? And even some designs apparently, and this is just through my own research, I can't really find that type of hat or that type of suit jacket with a button on this side. But apparently that whole setup, you have your hat, you have that string, you could even take that string down one side through this lapel, and then it would button on this side over here and keep everything kind of cinched up. So a very good example, I think, of how menswear is very practical, where it's very functional. And a lot of the things that we may not use anymore, like that lanyard for your hat, is something that still is represented in kind of the oddities of men's tailoring today. So a lot of traditions really carried down, which is pretty cool, I think. Now, the last thing, of course, is that this buttonhole is used for a boutonniere, right? And a boutonniere, or even if it's a real flower that is just a single flower and you poke it through the lapel here, is a great way to show a little extra style, a little extra personality. Kind of plays nicely with the pocket square, but it's super simple, and we always have that little holster, so to speak, for something like a flower. And on a handful of suits, I might do a close-up, I think, on another episode, but a handful of suits will have a little piece of string on the back side of the lapel, a couple inches below that opening for that buttonhole. And that's because you would put a flower stem, for instance, through the buttonhole on the outside, and then on the back you would tuck it through that little piece of thread. So it wouldn't be rotating and kind of falling out, it'd just be all kept nice and clean. Which, by the way, boutonniere is the French word for buttonhole. So here in the United States, though, we call a boutonniere a buttonhole. We also call a boutonniere that collection of flowers and that floral arrangement that we think of for proms or weddings. So there you have it, kind of a quick little fire hose explanation of some of the different stories of where this particular buttonhole came from. And again, it's really interesting, a lot of menswear, if you kind of start digging into it, there's a whole bunch of different stories, a whole bunch of different opinions for why we have certain things that we have today and what the genesis was over time. Always interesting. All right, let me know what you guys think. Always curious about your comments, and we'll do some more episodes, I think, on the boutonniere specifically, because I don't think I really did a good job capturing it in my last video. There are a handful of different ways of putting on a boutonniere in the men's suiting world, and there are a lot of different opinions on how to do it, so I want to kind of cover all my bases. Alright, don't forget to subscribe. More videos coming, ideally every weekday. We've been doing pretty good, I don't mind saying so. And we'll be back with another episode before you know it. Alright, thanks for your attention, guys. We appreciate it.